Hello, folks! Sorry for the gigantic wait, but welcome back to Magnus Monday Madness, where I summarize and rank all the episodes in a given season of the Magnus archives. Seeing as it's been a while since I last uploaded, I've linked a playlist with the previous episodes in the description in case any of you need a refresher. I've ranked each episode on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 means terrifying, and 1 means I didn't find it scary in the slightest. In previous seasons, we learned that there are 14 entities, each of which feeds off of a different category of fear. These entities are currently too vast to enter our world in their true forms, so instead, they turn objects, individuals, and locations into avatars that do their bidding for them. These avatars will collaborate with one another to attempt rituals that would allow their respective entities to cross into our world in their true forms. Our main characters are members of the Magnus Institute, an organization that collects accounts of the supernatural to feed an entity known as the Eye, which represents the fear of being watched or exposed. Last season, the team disrupted the Stranger's attempt at a ritual, but not without casualties. Tim died, Daisy is now trapped in a coffin, and our main character, John, is in a coma. On top of it all, the gang's boss, Elias Bouchard, has been arrested, but not before he could hand control of the Institute over to an avatar of the lonely named Peter Lucas. All caught up? Then let's begin. 121. Far Away. Back in Season 1, we met a man named Antonio Blake, whose dreams foretold people's deaths. In this episode, he visits John in the hospital and admits his real name isn't Antonio, but rather Oliver Banks, which is a completely useless plot twist considering his name had never appeared anywhere else in the series. He gives a statement about how he tried to escape his dreams by joining a ship that was headed to Point Nemo, the most remote place on Earth. But even there, his dreams continued, warning him that the entire crew would soon die. This came true when a satellite crashed down from space, and Oliver only survived it by choosing to embrace the end and accept his role as its avatar. He advises John to do the same with the Eye in order to wake back up. Georgie enters the room and chases Oliver off, as she can immediately tell he's an avatar of the end due to her encounters with it. 3 stars. 122. Zombie. Georgie warns the rest of the team that Banks was around John, but when she and Basira go to check on him, he wakes back up. Basira had a feeling he would, and so she brought a statement for him to strengthen himself with. Georgie leaves, devastated by what John has become. The statement describes a woman who has trouble empathizing with others to the point where she sees them as no more than blankly staring zombies. Basira gives John a heads up that while he was unconscious, Martin has become Peter Lucas's right-hand man and is now always off on secret assignments. 1 star. 123. Web development. John returns to the Institute, only for Melanie to immediately attack him, blaming him for everything that's gone wrong since the Unknowing. Turns out, the Institute's intervention in the Unknowing alerted the other entities that the gang was monitoring and planning to disrupt their rituals. They've started sending avatars to attack the Institute and its employees, most of whom have had to move into the Institute itself, as they stand little chance of surviving these encounters on their own without its resources. Even with Elias gone, the employees still find themselves physically unable to quit. The burden of protecting everyone from these attacks has fallen onto Melanie, who managed to fight off some of the avatars with nothing more than a knife. She lets John go, and he begins to research a statement about an online forum where every thread describes why a certain person should be dead, and if the author is convincing enough, the person will actually perish and become trapped within the forum. 3 stars. 124. Left hanging. A cable car going up a mountain suddenly stops. One of its passengers, Simon Fairchild, opens the door from within, and a giant hand reaches down from the sky through the door and pulls a passenger out. While John researches the statement, he runs into Martin and is excited to see him again, but Martin seems very detached and brushes him off. 3 stars. 125. Civilian Casualties. The residents of a small Scottish community are sent into a frenzy where they all attack one another. John recognizes that this is the Slaughter's work, and with his developing powers, realizes that the Slaughter is also the reason Melanie was so aggressive with him the other day. Upon investigating further, he realizes that the bullet from when Melanie was shot by a Slaughter avatar is still in her leg, slowly turning her into one herself. The powers it's been giving her are what have allowed her to defend the Institute from other entities' attacks. But, as its influence grows, so will her thirst for violence. There's the risk she might turn against the Institute on the side of the Slaughter. To prevent this, John and Basira ambush Melanie while she's sleeping, cut open her leg, and forcibly remove the bullet. When she wakes up, she is justifiably furious. 3 stars. 126. Sculptor's Tool. A person taking a pottery class gets a bad vibe from one of her classmates, whose twisted sculptures cause her physical pain to look at. She tries to drop the class, but its time and location keep changing so that it appears wherever she does. While researching this statement, Martin finds a tape recorder. He notes that they stopped appearing around the Institute while John was in the hospital, but ever since he returned, so did they. Peter catches Martin talking to the recorder and warns him that doing so might disrupt their plans. 2 stars. 127. Remains to be seen. A man blames his poor health on a collection of books he stole from a tomb, but when he tries to return them, he drops dead. Upon his death, the book's pages turned blank, and when an autopsy is performed, his internal organs are covered with still animated eyes. The episode ends with Basira visiting Elias in prison. The Eye told him that Melanie's connection to the Slaughter has been severed, along with the powers she'd been using to protect her co-workers. He warns Basira that the Institute needs another avatar who can defend them. 2 stars. 128. Heavy Goods. Breakin from Breakin and Hope arrives at the Institute, and John goes to confront him. Breakin reveals that since losing Hope, he's begun to fade, but wanted to make one last delivery, one to taunt the Institute. He reveals the coffin that Daisy is trapped within, but since they can't open the coffin without being drawn into it themselves, the archivists are stuck listening to the wails of the people trapped within it. Devastated, Basira runs off and warns John not to use his powers to track her. 3 stars. 129. Submerged. Inspired by Basira's warning, John uses his powers to figure out where Martin is so they can talk. John admits that he misses Martin, but Martin begs to be left alone. John struggles not to use his powers, lamenting how it's becoming more and more difficult to tell which of his thoughts are truly his and what knowledge has been placed there by the Eye. He returns to the Institute and researches a statement in which a gentrified neighborhood is flooded to the point of being submerged, which shouldn't have been physically possible. 4 stars. 130. Meat. John finds an out-of-place statement by Gertrude in which she disrupts the flesh's ritual, which consists of a giant mouth opening in the ground and being fed piles of meat. John's eye powers reveal to him that the web moved this statement out of place to try to hint to him that the key to saving Daisy from the coffin lies in the flesh. While John doesn't trust the web, this is the only lead he has. 3 stars. 131. Flesh. Melanie finally confronts John about the forced surgery, delivering a fantastic monologue in which she reveals she wasn't being tricked into becoming an avatar of the Slaughter. She wanted to be one. She'd always been an angry person, but the Slaughter validated that anger and gave her something to do with it. It was in this episode that Melanie King officially became my favorite Magnus Archives character. A smooch upon her head. Melanie reveals that even with her powers, she'd needed help defending the Institute. She got this from Helen, who currently has some of the avatars that attacked them trapped within the distortion's hallways. John asks Helen if he can talk with Jared Hopworth, a flesh avatar she trapped, and promises Jared freedom in exchange for his help. Jared uses his bone-shifting abilities to remove 2 of John's ribs, as having part of your body in the regular world when you enter another entity's domain serves as an anchor you can use to get yourself back out. Helen releases Jared, as per the agreement he made with John, but the door she does so through drops him into a river. This isn't relevant information, I just think Helen's funny. 2 stars. 132. Entombed. John leaves his rib anchor with the team and then enters the coffin. The stairs within it lead to a corridor that gets tighter and tighter until John is squeezed on all sides and crawling to get around. Eventually, his path is blocked by Daisy. She shares that here in the Buried, she is cut off entirely from her own entity, the Hunt, and finally able to recognize what a monster she acted like under it. John empathizes, and they promise to hold one another accountable from now on, working together to ensure neither of them loses any more of what remains of their humanity. John grabs onto her and uses his anchor to pull the 2 of them back into the regular world. 4 stars. 133. Dead Horse. While helping Daisy with her physical therapy, John reads a statement to refresh himself. The statement focuses on an expedition to find a mythical city, but those who went on it became trapped in a limbo in which explorers who have disappeared over the years continue to stubbornly pursue their quests. John thinks this might be part of the Hunt's ritual, but Daisy thinks the Hunt doesn't want its ritual to succeed, because then the chase would be over. Daisy admits to John that she's been struggling to reconnect with Basira, since Basira is paranoid that Daisy might be a shapeshifter from the stranger, especially considering how different her behavior is now that she's trying to break from the Hunt. 1 star. 134. Time of Revelation. Martin finds a letter to Gertrude from Adelard Decker in which he speculates a 15th entity might be emerging. He shares a statement from a woman who was once briefly pulled into a domain where no humans remained, only lifeless corpses. While one might assume this is the work of the End, Decker suspects a new entity might be splintering from it, much like the flesh once did from the Hunt. He calls this entity the Extinction, and believes it will feed on our fear of humanity, or even Earth as a whole, being destroyed. We learned that researching the Extinction has been the main goal of Martin and Peter's secret project. They discuss the possibility of an extinction ritual, and Peter reveals that there are 2 entities who have never attempted a ritual. The Web, which would be bored without other entities to scheme against, and the End, which seems to recognize that if it killed everyone, there'd be no fear left to feed off of. 2 stars. 135. Dark Matter. A physicist named Manuela Dominguez joins the People's Church of the Divine Host. She creates a miniature black sun that emanates darkness instead of light for the Dark's ritual. When John tries to use his powers to find out more, the Dark is able to block him out, as it, the fear of the unknown, is the opposite of the I, the fear of being known. 1 star. 136. The Puppeteer. John sees Melanie about to leave the Institute and casually asks her where she's going, forgetting that his powers will force the truth from her. She admits she's been going to therapy, as his and Basira's betrayal has been haunting her. Meanwhile, Daisy officially takes a job at the Magnus Institute, hoping that the Eye's influence will be able to ward off the Hunts. She joins John in researching a statement where a mobility-impaired special effects artist designs a system that allows others to puppeteer him with the help of a woman named Annabelle Kane. 3 stars. 137. Nemesis. John learns about a warship named Nemesis that carried avatars of the Slaughter from a variety of nations and eras. These avatars attempted their entity's ritual, but were foiled due to interference from the Web. 2 stars. 138. The Architecture of Fear. Martin finds a letter Robert Smirk wrote to Jonah Magnus, the founder of the Magnus Institute, begging him not to attempt the Eye's ritual. But it seems Smirk died before he could complete the letter. Martin is growing suspicious that by isolating him, Peter is trying to turn him into an avatar of the lonely, but he feels pressure to cooperate since at least Peter's attention is on him and not one of his co-workers. 3 stars. 139. Chosen. John discovers a statement from a member of the Cult of the Lightless Flame that explains that Agnes Montague was supposed to be the cult's messiah who would complete the Desolations ritual. Over the years, the cult sacrificed people to her in hopes that it would grow her powers. But when Agnes fell in love, her dedication to the cult wavered. They killed her to reclaim her powers and try again. John is still worried about Martin and tries using his powers to check in on him, but a barrier has been placed around Martin and Peter that causes John pain whenever he tries to use his powers in relation to them. 4 stars, I always feel so bad for Agnes. 140. The Movement of the Heavens. Basira and John look into a statement that reveals the People's Church of the Divine Host has been around since at least the 16th century. Basira suspects its current leader, Maxwell Rayner, is possessed by one of the church's original members, and that his kidnapping of the child Callum Brody was an attempt to pass this consciousness on to a new form. John and Basira decide to book a trip to Ny-Ålesund for the summer solstice, when the days will be longest and the dark at its weakest. 1 star. 141. Doomed Voyage. Basira gets seasick during their travels to Ny-Ålesund, and while she's distracted, John feeds on one of the crew members by extracting a statement from them. The crew member was a former employee of Mikhail Salesa's. He describes how Salesa's final job before retiring centered around obtaining a broken camera, but he disappeared as soon as it was obtained. Basira then appears and confronts John for using his powers on an innocent bystander, but John accuses her of letting him do it so that she too could feed on the statement, seeing as it seems to have cured her seasickness. 1 star. 142. Scrutiny. A woman shows up at the Institute to file a complaint, and Martin agrees to help her. She reveals she was once trapped under a pile of rubble, but through hard work was able to heal from this trauma, at least until she was approached on the street by John, who used his powers to force a statement about this incident from her. Ever since meeting him, all of her coping strategies have turned useless. Every night, she dreams she is reliving the incident, only now with John sitting there watching her. Martin is horrified and wants to believe that the Eye forced John to do this. Daisy, on the other hand, insists that while an avatar's actions can be influenced by their entity, they still have free will and should be held accountable as individuals. Martin points out that this is rich coming from a cop who committed police brutality. 4 stars. 143. Heart of Darkness. John and Basira arrive at the People's Church's headquarters, but there's only one member left, Manuela Dominguez. Dominguez reveals the Dark has already attempted its ritual, but were foiled by Gertrude. Disheartened, the church disbanded, but just in case, John destroys the sun Dominguez made, so it can't be reused in any future attempts. 1 star. 144. Decrypted. Martin researches a statement in which a man's iPod music occasionally cuts out and is replaced with audio of a person listing numbers. Eventually, the man starts hearing the numbers even when away from the device, and whenever he does, he gets the feeling that they signal the end of humanity. The numbers, when deciphered, say the world is always ending. Daisy interrupts Martin's research to announce that John and Basira are back, but he snaps that he's sick of acting like his co-workers are his friends, when really, they're all just stuck with one another. 4 stars. 145. Infectious Doubts. John finds a recording of Gertrude Robinson and Arthur Nolan, the former leader of the Cult of the Lightless Flame, discussing Agnes. Arthur admits he regrets treating the girl as a prophet rather than a person, denying her the care that a child required. Gertrude reveals that she tried to conduct a ritual the web had given her to seal away Agnes's power, but this ended up being a trick that bound Agnes's soul to Gertrude's. This connection to someone who still had some humanity allowed Agnes to start feeling emotions such as love, and thus break from her destiny. In the girl's honor, Gertrude has been protecting Agnes's boyfriend from the Cult of the Lightless Flame, who blame him for ruining their ritual and want to exact vengeance. John is interrupted by Georgie, who's there to give Melanie a ride to her therapy appointment. She tells John he'd probably benefit from therapy too, but when he sarcastically asks if she thinks they should carpool, Georgie admits she no longer feels safe around him. 1 star. 146. Threshold. John researches a statement in which a door leading to the distortion kept appearing before a man, but he always managed to resist opening it. John discusses this statement with Helen, but when he starts criticizing her for killing her victims, she argues that death is a better fate than having one's trauma consume them for the rest of their life, as what happens to John's victims. The team comes together to confront John about how he's been extracting statements from unwilling people when he could be feeding off the ones that were already recorded in the archives. But he claims these actions are compulsive, and since compulsions are often linked to the web, he wants to go to Hilltop Road to investigate. 4 stars. 147. Weaver. John brings along Daisy, Basira, and Melanie, and while the house is empty, a note has been left for them by Annabelle Kane. John begins reading it aloud on instinct, only for the letter to call him out on this and say he probably can't stop either. Frustratingly, this is correct, and John is unable to put the letter down or switch to reading in his head. Annabelle tells John that he is not being controlled by the eye any more than the rest of us are controlled by the laws of physics. She repeats Daisy's notion that while the entities can influence people, we all remain responsible for our own actions. John is forced to reconcile that feeding on people was his choice, and he needs to make a conscious effort to cease doing so. Knowing he probably wants a statement from her, Annabelle shares that growing up in a large family, she had to be manipulative in order to get her needs met. When she was a child, she encountered an avatar of the web who marked her so she could later become one as well. 2 stars. 148. Extended surveillance. John goes back to feeding on old statements, starting with one about a guard who gained the ability to see through security cameras in the mall he worked at. The guard went missing, but his colleagues started seeing him on the CCTV monitors, even though he wasn't physically there. To John's distress, he realizes that since he started feeding on live statements, reading these old ones is no longer enough to nourish him. 2 stars. 149. Concrete jungle. A group of scientists working in the Amazon come across statues made of garbage that begin to move. When they strike one of the scientists, concrete pours from every orifice of his body until he is encased in it and has become one of them. Martin tries to figure out whether this statement is linked to the stranger or the potentially emerging extinction entity. But when Georgie comes by, he gets into an argument with her about John. She thinks John has gone past the point of saving and will drag the rest of the team down with him. Martin tries defending him, but quickly becomes fed up with the discussion and teleports away, showing the audience that he has begun to develop powers from the lonely. 4 stars, because those sculptures sound terrifying. 150. Cul-De-Sac. While house hunting, a man gets lost in an endless cul-de-sac that is completely void of people. He enters one of the houses and finds the corpse of a woman who killed herself in order to escape this nothingness. His phone starts to ring with a call from his boyfriend, and he is dragged back into the regular world. After John finishes reading this statement, Melanie approaches him. She says she can't stand working here anymore and being complicit in the harm John and the Eye are causing. While, like all of her co-workers, she is physically incapable of quitting, she warns John she plans to find a way out. 3 stars. 151. Big picture. Peter Lucas arranges a meeting between Martin and Simon Fairchild, an avatar of the Vast, to discuss the extinction, which Simon believes isn't a fully fledged power yet, but is on the brink of emerging as one, an event that could lead to the end of the world. Simon tells Martin he was once a 16th century painter who fell while working on a mural, only instead of falling downwards, the Vast caused him to fall up. Instead of this terrifying him, Simon found it delightful and pledged himself to the Vast. For the past few centuries, he's transferred his conscience from one form to the other so he could continue spreading its fear. Basira finds tape recordings of Martin discussing the extinction with Peter and shares them with Daisy and Melanie. The girls agree to keep this to themselves for now, as they don't trust John with this information. 2 stars. 152. A Gravedigger's Envy. A man with insomnia's sleep improves when he gets a job at a cemetery, but the corpses keep coming back to life in the middle of the night. Whenever this happens, he decides to kill them again, not because he's scared of the dead walking on Earth, but because he's grumpy that they woke him up. And the pettiness of that is why I find this episode hilarious and can't imagine giving it more than 1 star. After reading this statement, John finally accepts Helen's offer to have a chat about the moral dilemmas they're experiencing as avatars. Helen shares she originally felt guilty about luring people into the distortion, but the relief that comes from doing so outweighs all the guilt. John admits to her that while the eye's powers allow him to remotely observe many things, the tunnels beneath the Institute have become a literal blind spot for him. He hypothesizes Robert Smirk might have designed them as a neutral ground or safe space from the entities. 153. Love bombing. A lonely woman joins a cult that's obsessed with the concept of love and expressing it to one another. As time goes on, though, its members turn paranoid and begin accusing one another of being insincere in their affections. Fearing such accusations, the woman doesn't raise any concerns about how the cult's hygiene levels have tanked, even when the cult starts eating rotting food and the members' bodies begin turning into mush. 4 stars. 154. Bloody Mary. John finds a recording of Gertrude using the catalog of the trapped dead to question a ghost named Eric Delano, who it turns out is Gerard Key's dad. Eric had been unhappily employed at the Institute, but when he found a way to escape it, Gerard's mom Mary murdered Eric and bound him to the book to prevent him from leaving her. After getting Gertrude to promise that she'd protect Jerry, he reveals that blind people are immune to the powers of the eye. John immediately runs to Martin and begs him to join him in gouging out their eyes and running away together. Martin calls VS and accuses John of coming to him because he knew Martin would try to talk him out of it. Seeing him in person, John is able to sense the extent to which Martin and the Lonely are now bound, and he begs Martin to let others back in before the Lonely can consume him. 3 stars. 155. Cost of living. A philanthropist has an out-of-body experience while on the brink of death, and is only able to return to their body after taking another person's life. They begin to die on an almost monthly basis. Each time, they take another person's life for more chances at their own. They figure out that these sacrifices only temporarily ward off death, hence why they die so often. So, they begin experimenting with the kinds of lives they take. Eventually, they go as far as to kill a baby, all while justifying to themselves that the philanthropy they've done makes their life worth more than others. John tells the rest of the team about how they can escape the Institute. Basira thinks it's too drastic, the Eye is helping Daisy resist the hunt, but Melanie is willing to go through with it. They call an ambulance for her, and the episode ends with her doing what she must. 4 stars. 156. Reflection. Martin investigates a statement about a fair where the attendees are starving to death, and the prizes are bones for them to chew on. They are so hungry that eventually they turn to eating one another. This episode ends with Peter telling Martin it's time to execute their plan as they head into the tunnels beneath the Institute. 2 stars. 157. Rotten Core. A statement from Adelard Decker describes a town that had to be quarantined due to a disease that caused one's skin and muscles to slide off their body. Decker went to investigate, but caught the disease, and burnt the entire town down to keep it from spreading. 4 stars. 158. Panopticon. Daisy and Basira learn that Elias has escaped from prison, and warn John, who while searching for Martin, found the recordings of him and Peter saying it's time to put their plan into action. Down in the tunnels, Peter and Martin find a Panopticon left over from the prison that predated the Institute. Within it, they find the somehow still living body of the Institute's founder, Jonah Magnus. Peter tells Martin he needs to kill Jonah and replace him within the Panopticon in order to prevent the Eye from attempting its ritual. But before Martin can decide if he's willing to go through with this, Elias arrives on the scene. Peter orders Martin to kill Elias, only for Martin to reveal that he's been playing Peter this whole time, pretending to go along with his plans, only to keep him distracted from the other archivists while they made a plan to stop him based on the tapes that Martin had intentionally been leaving around. Back with John, Daisy, and Basira, a tape labeled Play Me has been left for them. The audio consists of Gertrude and Elias's final confrontation, in which she accuses him of secretly being Jonah Magnus, only with his conscience transferred to another body, much like Maxwell Rayner or Simon Fairchild. Before the gang can act on this information, the other entities launch yet another attack on the Institute. Realizing that this is an attempt to distract them from whatever's going on in the tunnels, Daisy agrees to use her hunt powers one last time to hold off their attackers, but only if Basira promises to kill her if she starts being a threat to other people. John runs through the tunnels and arrives at the Panopticon, but only Elias remains. Elias warns him that Peter has fled back to the Lonely and taken Martin with him, but John is determined to get Martin back. This episode is certainly filled with a lot of tension, but not necessarily horror, so I can only give it 1 star. 159. The Last. John travels into the Lonely and begs Martin to return with him, but Martin keeps teleporting away, telling John it's too late. He confesses he really did love John, but John doesn't get to spend seasons being cold to him, only to start caring once he pulls away. John keeps trying to track Martin down, all while being taunted by Peter Lucas. John uses his powers to force Peter to reveal his plans, which had been to prevent the extinction from emerging by triggering the Lonely's ritual using Martin. John tries to force more out of him, but his powers overwhelm Peter and end up killing him. With Peter dead, the Lonely's grasp on Martin breaks, and he takes back everything he said to John as John brings them back to the regular world. 3 stars. 160. The Eye Opens. It's been a few weeks since Martin and John escaped the Lonely, and they've gone on vacation to Scotland in order to recuperate. Basira's been sending them statements to keep John fed, one of which initially appears to be about a fire, but psych! It's actually a letter from Elias. Or, I guess, Jonah. John tries to stop reading, but much like we saw with Annabelle Cain's letter, once he starts reading something aloud, he can't stop. Jonah reveals that the rituals always fail because the entities sabotage one another, all wanting to be the first to break into our world. The Eye realized it could get around this by designing a ritual that would allow all 14 entities to cross over simultaneously, and John is a key part of it. Throughout John's adventures, he's encountered and been marked by all 14 entities. Naturally, as one of its avatars, he's marked by the Eye, but all the way back when he was just a boy, he was marked by the Web when he found that first Leitner book. He was marked by the Corruption when attacked by Jane Prentice, the Stranger during the Unknowing, and the End during his subsequent near-death experience. He has traveled through the Distortion's hallways, marking him with a spiral. His encounters with Michael Crew marked him with the Vast, Jude Perry with the Desolation, Melanie with the Slaughter, and Daisy with the Hunt. In saving Daisy, he was marked by the Buried and Flesh respectively, and when he destroyed the Dark Sun, he received its mark. Last but not least, saving Martin from the Lonely gave him his final mark, And now that he has all 14, he can be the conduit through which the ritual will be inducted. John is forced to recite an incantation and can feel reality tearing as the entities slip through. Martin, who was out on a walk, bursts into the room and tells John to come outside, where they find a giant eye suspended in the sky staring at them. Ooh, damn, that's how a season ends, baby! Listening to this episode, I don't feel fear as much as I feel anticipation, but I'm gonna give it 3 stars anyways. Join me next Monday as we wrap this series up and witness the apocalypse with our own ears.